How does a car company become the most valuable company on Earth while the global economy is collapsing? October 2008, banks are falling, markets are crashing, and billions are being erased every single day. Then, in the middle of that chaos, something impossible happens. Volkswagen AG suddenly becomes the most valuable company in the world. This is the story of how a sports car company turned the stock market into a battlefield. If you love the hidden stories behind the car world, subscribe and leave a like. Because this wasn't about cars anymore. It was about power, and it all started with a family. But enough talking. Let's get into it. Back in 2008, the world wasn't just slowing down. It was breaking apart. Lehman Brothers had collapsed, banks stopped trusting each other, credit markets froze, and panic spread through every corner of Wall Street. Money wasn't moving, and when money stops moving, everything starts falling. Companies were cutting jobs, factories were slowing down, and investors were selling anything they could just to survive. In moments like that, car companies are usually among the first to suffer. They depend on financing, consumer confidence, and stable markets. And in late 2008, none of that existed anymore. The auto industry looked fragile, exposed, almost defenseless. Shares across the sector were under pressure, and the logic was simple. If the economy keeps collapsing, car sales collapse with it. That was the bet everyone was making. And that's exactly why what happened to Volkswagen AG made no sense at all. While the rest of the market was drowning, Volkswagen did the opposite. It exploded. Its stock didn't fall with the crisis. It went vertical. And for a brief moment, in the middle of the worst financial meltdown in generations, Volkswagen became the most valuable company on Earth. But this story didn't start in 2008. It started decades earlier, inside one of the most powerful families in automotive history, because this wasn't just a battle between Porsche and Volkswagen AG. In many ways, it was a battle within the same bloodline. The Porsche and Piëch family had built both empires. It all goes back to Ferdinand Porsche, the engineer who created the original Volkswagen Beetle and later gave birth to Porsche itself. One man built the roots of both companies, and his family inherited both legacies. But legacies create power, and power creates conflict. Over the decades, the family split into branches with different visions, different ambitions, and different ideas of who should control what. From the outside, Porsche buying Volkswagen looked like a bold business move. But underneath it, this was personal. A fight over legacy, influence, and control of an empire that both sides believed belonged to them. And by 2008, that quiet family tension was about to become a financial war. By the mid-2000s, Porsche had a problem and an opportunity. Volkswagen was much bigger, much heavier, and far more complex. But Porsche believed it could take control. At first, the strategy looked simple. Porsche started buying Volkswagen shares openly, increasing its stake step by step. Nothing unusual, just a smaller company trying to gain influence over a larger one. But what the market could see was only part of the story. Behind the scenes, Porsche was building something far more sophisticated, not with factories or engines, but with derivatives. Specifically, cash-settled options, financial contracts that didn't require Porsche to physically buy the stock right away, but still gave them effective control over huge amounts of Volkswagen shares. It was the perfect invisible weapon. On paper, Porsche looked like a major shareholder. In reality, it controlled far more than anyone understood. And that distinction mattered, because the market still believed there were plenty of Volkswagen shares available to trade. But the reality was very different. With every quiet move, Porsche was shrinking the free float, tightening the supply, and slowly turning Volkswagen stock into something rare. The trap wasn't loud. There was no dramatic announcement, no public warning. It was being built in silence, piece by piece, while everyone else kept looking at the wrong numbers. And Wall Street walked right into it. Hedge funds looked at Volkswagen and saw what seemed like the easiest trade in the world. The stock price looked inflated, the economy was collapsing, consumer spending was dying, and the car industry was heading into one of its worst periods in decades. On paper, Volkswagen looked like it had nowhere to go but down. So the short sellers moved in. They borrowed shares, sold them, and waited for the fall, planning to buy them back cheaper later and pocket the difference. It was standard Wall Street logic. Simple, aggressive, profitable. Except this time, the math was hiding a trap. Because while hedge funds were building bigger and bigger short positions, the pool of available shares was getting smaller and smaller. Porsche was absorbing stock directly, controlling even more through options, and the state of Lower Saxony already held a massive strategic stake that would never be sold. The supply was vanishing, but the demand to buy those shares back was growing every day. And the terrifying part is that most of Wall Street didn't realize it. They thought they were hunting an overvalued stock. In reality, they were building the pressure inside a bomb that Porsche had already armed. And then came the moment everything changed. On Sunday, October 26, 2008, while the markets were closed and Wall Street was trying to recover from another brutal week, Porsche released a statement that changed everything overnight. Until that moment, the market believed Porsche owned around 42% of Volkswagen AG. A huge stake, yes, but nothing that seemed dangerous. Just a sports car company slowly increasing its influence over a much bigger automaker. But that visible stake was only part of the story. What nobody fully understood was how much Porsche controlled behind the scenes. For months, Porsche had been building its position not just through direct ownership, but through cash-settled options, financial contracts that gave them effective control over shares without the market seeing the full picture. And when they finally revealed the truth, it hit like a shockwave. Porsche wasn't sitting on 42%. It effectively controlled 74.1% of Volkswagen. That number alone was enough to shake the market. But the real panic came when traders did the rest of the math. Around 20% of Volkswagen was already owned by the German state of Lower Saxony, a political stake that was never going to be sold. That meant almost 95% of all Volkswagen shares were locked away. Suddenly, the market realized there was almost nothing left to trade. And that's when the trap became visible. Because hedge funds had spent months building massive short positions against Volkswagen, borrowing shares, selling them, and planning to buy them back later at lower prices. That strategy only works if the shares are there when you need them. But now they weren't. The supply had vanished. And every short seller understood the same terrifying thing at the exact same time. They still had to buy back shares, but there were almost no shares left to buy. That's the nightmare at the heart of a short squeeze. Not just losing money, but being forced to buy something that suddenly becomes scarce while everyone else is desperately trying to do the exact same thing. In one statement, Porsche had turned Volkswagen stock into the rarest asset on the market. What looked like a normal takeover strategy was suddenly revealed as a perfectly engineered trap, and Wall Street realized, far too late, that it had walked straight into it. By the time markets opened the next morning, this wasn't about strategy anymore. It was about survival. What happened next was pure chaos. The moment markets opened on Monday, every short seller rushed for the same thing: Volkswagen shares. Not because they wanted them, but because they needed them. They had borrowed stock, sold it, and now they had to buy it back before the losses became catastrophic. But there was one problem. There were almost no shares left. And when demand explodes while supply disappears, price stops behaving rationally. It becomes violent. That's exactly what happened. Volkswagen AG stock didn't climb. It exploded. In hours, the price went from around 200 euros to over 500 euros, then kept climbing, and at its peak briefly touched more than 1,000 euros per share. A stock that many on Wall Street had bet would fall had become the most expensive stock on the planet. Traders weren't buying because they believed in Volkswagen. They were buying because they were trapped, and every minute they waited made the pain worse. This is what a short squeeze really is. Panic buying, forced buying, survival buying. And when billions are at stake, panic moves faster than logic. Hedge funds started bleeding money at a speed that seemed unreal. Some lost hundreds of millions in hours. Others lost billions. Entire strategies collapsed in front of the market. Trading floors turned into chaos, phones ringing nonstop, traders trying to find shares that simply didn't exist anymore. For a brief moment, in the middle of the worst financial crisis in generations, Volkswagen became the most valuable company in the world. Bigger than oil giants, bigger than tech giants, bigger than everyone. And that's what made it so surreal. The world economy was collapsing, banks were dying, and somehow a car company had become the center of the biggest financial bloodbath on Wall Street. Porsche hadn't just squeezed the market, it had detonated it. And this is where the story gets uncomfortable. Because once the dust settled, the question wasn't how Porsche made it happen. The question was whether it should have happened at all. On paper, Porsche hadn't broken the rules. They bought shares legally, they used derivatives legally, and when the time came, they disclosed their position. Technically, everything was within the system. But legality and intention are two very different things. Critics argued that Porsche knew exactly what it was doing. that this wasn't just a takeover strategy, but a deliberate squeeze designed to corner short sellers and force them into panic. And honestly, looking at how precise the setup was, it's hard not to ask the same question. Porsche knew the float was shrinking. Porsche knew hedge funds were heavily short. Porsche knew that once the real numbers came out, there would be no way out for the people betting against Volkswagen. That's not an accident. That's strategy. But then again, short sellers weren't innocent either. They made an aggressive bet, they trusted the public numbers, and they assumed the market would behave the way it always had. They were playing the same game. Porsche just understood the board better. And that's what makes this story so fascinating. Was it genius, or was it manipulation dressed in legal paperwork? Regulators investigated, investors complained, lawsuits followed. But the truth stayed blurry, because in finance, the line between brilliant strategy and ruthless exploitation is often razor thin. Porsche didn't invent the rules. It simply used them better than everyone else. And maybe that's what terrified Wall Street the most. Not that they were cheated, but that they were beaten at their own game. But here's the twist nobody saw coming. Porsche had won the battle. It had trapped Wall Street, crushed short sellers, and pushed Volkswagen AG to heights nobody thought possible. For a moment, it looked like Porsche had pulled off the impossible, a small sports car company taking control of one of the largest automakers in the world. But winning the squeeze and winning the war were two very different things. Because building that position wasn't cheap. Porsche had borrowed enormous amounts of money to finance its Volkswagen takeover. And when the global financial crisis kept getting worse, that debt became a problem of its own. A huge problem. The same financial system Porsche had weaponized was now turning against it. Credit markets were frozen, banks were nervous, and suddenly Porsche was carrying billions in debt at the worst possible moment. The hunter was starting to bleed. What looked like a masterstroke was becoming dangerously heavy to sustain. And then came the ultimate irony. Instead of Porsche taking over Volkswagen, the exact opposite happened. In 2009, Volkswagen stepped in and began taking control of Porsche, absorbing the company that had tried to conquer it. The predator became the prey. After all the strategy, all the secrecy, all the financial warfare, the empire Porsche wanted to control ended up controlling Porsche instead. And maybe that's what makes this story unforgettable. Not the money, not the panic, not even the short squeeze itself, but the irony of it all. Porsche built one of the most brilliant financial traps in modern history, won the battle, and still lost the war. In the end, the most powerful weapon of the 2008 crisis wasn't a bank, wasn't a government, and wasn't a hedge fund. It was a family. And that's what makes this story unforgettable. For 2 days in 2008, the most powerful force in global finance wasn't a bank, a government, or a hedge fund. It was a car company, a sports car company that turned Wall Street into a battlefield and changed financial history forever. But what do you think? Was Porsche a genius for playing the game better than everyone else? Or did they cross the line? Let us know in the comments, because this story still divides people today. And if you want more hidden stories from the automotive world, the ones nobody tells, subscribe now and check out the next video, because some of the craziest stories in car history have nothing to do with the cars themselves. See you in the next story.